After setting the stage in the first Perek of Megillat Esther, we now enter into the story of Mordechai and Esther with the second Perek. Vashti is no longer on the scene, removed from her position because of her refusal to appear before the king. And now the king finds himself in a position where he regrets his actions and needs to find a new queen to serve alongside him. Chazal note that Vashti had been of royal lineage, and Achashverosh wants somebody of independence, which may be the very reason why he would choose Esther Mikol HaNa'arot. Not just that she was the most beautiful, but she served as a substitute, a powerful queen to go along with a powerful king, a woman of independence who refused the normal and chose instead the very special way to prepare herself. At the very same time, in the second Perek, we're introduced to Mordechai, who was Yoshev Bishar HaMelech, who's sitting in the gates of the king. In the time of the Megillah, sitting in the gates of the king meant that you were a person of prominence. Mordechai was an officer of the court, which allowed him the opportunity to check in on Esther once she was chosen, Maya Asela. But it wasn't just that he was checking in on his relative to make sure that he was safe. But in the second Perek, we get the sense that Mordechai understands that there is something bigger happening, something behind the scenes that is about to create the difference for the Jewish people in Persia. And therefore, Rashi explains that he was saying Umaya Selah because he understood that something special was going to happen. It's interesting that when you compare the second Perek of Esther to the story of Yosef, you find many parallels. It's in the chapter 41 of Sefer Breshit. Vayavked HaMelech Pikidim are the words that Achashverosh uses when he appoints the various people to find a future queen. And also, when we talk about the Yosef story, similarly, we find other words, Vayikabetzuet kol shomer vayitav hadavar b'nei hamelech ki chen yimalu yemei, phrase after phrase after phrase, parallels between the Yosef story and the story of Esther. Why? Because in both stories, we find the Yad Hashem working behind the scenes, God slowly, through what seems to be normal political action, setting the stage for the ultimate salvation. And so when Mordechai and Esther wrote Megillat Esther, they chose words that remind us of another occasion when a similar story occurred, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu worked within the political structure, within what seems to be human events to create the salvation of the people. But it's not just that, because when we look at this second chapter, we also see that Esther follows the instructions of Mordechai, which is the ultimate irony, because Achashverosh deposed Vashti because she wouldn't listen to him, issued a command that all wives must listen to their husbands. But the Megillah makes a point that Esther didn't listen to him. She listened to Mordechai. And then finally, the conspiracy of Bigtan and Teresh, two men who wanted to depose Achashverosh. Their plot was foiled by Mordechai, who heard the story and chose not to seek immediate reward, but to store that reward for a later occasion. Unfortunately, it's because of that conspiracy, that threat, that in the coming chapter, Achashverosh chooses a more powerful person to manage affairs of state. Haman is elevated. But for this moment, Mordechai saves the day and ultimately is recorded in the Chronicles of the King, which will be a source of salvation in the future. Perek Bet, chapter 2, sets the stage of what is going to happen.